Hey, it's Paul with LSP Data, and in this video I want to walk you through a practical use of LLM that you can run locally. And again, we recently been focusing a lot on our AI indicators for violations, right? So let's say in this case, we're looking for break-in or probates. We can see that, properties are vacant, etc., right? So it makes it easy for our customers to export lists that are highly relevant, right? And where do we get started? Well, let's start with the code violations here, right? So major cities, right, throughout the US have what we call code violations, right? And I made a video, I'll link the videos on how to search for these code violations, but essentially you could easily Google your city name, code violations, open data, something similar to that, and you come across things like this one, right? When you go to the data, you can download this as a CSV or an Excel, and a lot of those may have a description or let's just call it violation type that you can use. But let's say you wanted to grab, this one, you can download it again as a CSV, and then you can kind of follow along, right? Again, depending on your city. But in a high level, what we want to do is we want to grab that CSV or Excel spreadsheet, and we want to run it through a Hugging Face model, and this is the DistilBart, right? And let me show you real quick what it is or where you got it from. So this is it, right? I'll include the link as well, just so you get an idea, but this is a mini model of BART, which does pretty well at contextualizing text and sentences and whatnot. But anyways, going back here, the intent of this is, again, to run what is called a zero shot. So if you have unclassified data, or in this case, we just have descriptions, right? So if we have description, and obviously there's thousands of records, how do we get meaningful information out of it, right? And what do I mean by this, right? Well, there's a lot of complaints or code violations. A lot of them may be around, someone left the vehicle, junk vehicles, obviously highly relevant ones like high grass, the structures collapsing, etc. But a lot of times it may be around a sidewalk or a driveway or street lights or whatever it is, things that aren't really relevant to you from a real estate point of view. But anyways, what we're doing is that, right, we're grabbing, in this case, downloading the CSV. We're gonna do this all in Python, right? And I just kind of want to break down the script a little bit. So depending on how you name your file, we're grabbing code violations. Usually I like to get, the violation number, and obviously the description of what is the complaint or what is the violation, right, itself. And again, we're going to use this this LLM model. I believe it's about 4 gigabytes long. It's a small one, so you can download it if you have a pretty decent laptop, like a really up-to-date laptop or really beefy desktop. You should be able to run this, right? And we're using something called zero shot classifier. Again, this allows us to not having to train a model to process this, which makes it a lot easier because that's a lot more costlier and whatnot, right? And yeah, so basically we're gonna process the CSV. We've added some context to the to the script, which I'll show you here in a second. So this is a script. We're loading the CSV, adding that zero shot classification, this DistilBart, right? And basically what we're doing is we're adding labels so the model can better understand a little bit of a context of, like, if we're referring to a vacant property, abandoned, distress, right? Same thing with things like probate, right? Again, I made other videos around our AI code violation processing, right? Sometimes, again, there may be a dead animal in the property, right? Especially when there's open lots, people tend to dump dogs or horses or whatever, depending on what city you're at. But ultimately, again, this is just going to output, a list that eventually looks like this, right? And again, we're starting with unstructured data. So in this case, just using this as a test, when we import some of those violations, right, we get all sorts of things. So this is a dump truck, right? Parked vehicle. There's, as you can see, some of them have nothing to do with the property, right? So instead of going and using a lot of SQL if like statements, right, which takes some time, we realized that we needed a better solution for this. And basically, as we're running that model that I just showed you a minute ago, we end up with something like this, right? Obviously, the ID is tied to the code violation or complaint ID, right? And this makes it a lot easier to classify. You know, this is a vacant property with related to code enforcement and whatnot, right? Some of them are relevant to probate and whatnot. But essentially, depending on how powerful your computer may be, right, you'll run this, right? I'll include the entire script here as well. But basically, again, depending on how much how big the spreadsheet is, etc., depends on the time that it's going to take. Again, could you grab this and run it through something like ChatGPT? Sure, probably. The problem is that obviously, if you you could probably prompt it something similar and just tell you to output the clean CSV. It may do that. But if you're like us and you're processing millions of records, this is not, it's not sustainable, right? And also for us, from the cost perspective, right? Because this model here is free, right? And obviously we invest a lot in our hardware to process a lot of our data, but basically it costs us nothing, right? Versus when we're doing other tasks, so like Gemini 3, GPT 5.1 are great models, but obviously we use them for other tasks, and they cost money, right? So if we're trying to process hundreds of thousands or millions of records through their API, obviously it's going to be very costly for us, right? So anyways, just wanted to kind of show you a practical use case that you can use, especially depending on your city, right? Because again, code violations are a great way to identify a lot of distressed properties, right? And especially those properties that have had multiple code violations. But and that's how we end up, in this type of situation, right? Obviously, we're contextualizing a lot of the data because sometimes from the code violations, you may just get an address and that's about it, right? You get the address and what is the violation. But obviously, you don't get any context around who owns it, mailing address, all that good information that you would get that we're able to provide. And again, like say if we came across this, it gives us some interesting bits, right? It tells us those specific ones, and it tells us why, that's pretty good, right? Again, but if you're doing bulk data like we are, obviously it makes a lot more sense to run your own model, right? And again, like this is still going. But anyways, this is sort of similar to the end result that you're gonna get. And obviously, for us, once it ends up in our platform, makes it a lot easy for you to pull records and obviously focus on skip tracing, mailing, etc. Right? But I'll leave it at that. I'll include the Python script if you're interested in. The only thing you have to change is obviously your input, right? So if you end up getting the CSV, just make sure you change your input and output path. Once you run this, the initial at the beginning, it's gonna pull this model automatically, right? And it's gonna save it to your local drive. For us, obviously this is a CSV example, but for us, you use basically connect to our database, process the records, and then put them back in a separate clean database, right? Or table. The most important thing here as well is that you have clean data, right? So it took us a while to obviously find a decent model that works without having to be trained. And that's why we use the zero shot method, right? So that way we can basically just kind of use these tags and the model is smart enough to identify, high likelihood, right? And at the same time, we on our back end, we clean a lot of the data, especially around the probate use cases, because like I said, someone can complain about their cat dying, their pet dying, and all sorts of things. But anyways, I'll leave it at that. I hope that helps you. And again, this is one of the most, I call it hidden gems, because that's how you truly identify some distressed properties. And again, I'll include our information on here on the video description. And again, if you get a chance, join our school community. I'll be posting some of these projects, and if you have any questions around automation or anything that you're trying to accomplish in the prop tech space, let us know. And I'll leave it at that.